This is Premium Times Half Hour every Thursday at 11 a.m.
On June 20, President Bola Tinubu arrived in France to attend the new Global Financing Summit. It is his first official trip outside of the country since his assumption into office as the next Nigerian president. Premium Times senior reporter covering foreign and diaspora affairs, Chiamaka Okafor, was in attendance at the summit. And on this week's episode, she'll be sharing highlights of all that happened at this summit and what Nigeria and Africa stand to benefit from the event. Welcome to Premium Times Half Hour. I'm your host, Titi Lokwe Fadari.
This is Premium Times Half Hour every Thursday at 11 a.m.
On this podcast show, we discuss important issues and matters of national importance. Premium Times is Nigeria's leading investigative and accountability platform, and we bring this show to you weekly as part of our mandate of providing the information you need to make informed decisions. The show spotlights exclusive reports produced by Premium Times reporters, from in-depth investigations and unique analysis to human angle stories. But before I delve into today's discussion, I will share some important stories that we published during the week. First, there's an editorial titled Emerging Headwind and Resetting Governance in States. The article noted that, with the exception of Lagos State, none of the states can sustain itself without funds from the monthly sharing of revenue by the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee. It further indicated that internally generated revenues are simply too hollow to sustain any proper fiscal activity, which is caused by misappropriation of funds, lack of vision, misplacement of priorities, award of dubious contracts, and padding of payrolls by the bureaucracy. The next report is an exclusive titled NNPCL's Secret Deal with OVH Leaves Workers Angry, Disillusioned. In October 2022, the Nigerian National Petroleum Commission Limited announced the acquisition of OVH Energy Marketing Limited, the company behind the Oando retail brand in West African countries. But this investigative piece exposed that it was actually OVH Energy that did the acquisition. You can read up on these reports on our website, www.premiumtimesng.com. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll continue the conversation on Tinubu's attendance at the new Global Financing Summit in France. Stay tuned.
This is Premium Times Half Hour every Thursday at 11 a.m.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Premium Times Half Hour on Premium Times' podcast. I'm Titi Lokwe Fadari. Before Chiamaka shares her experience at the new Global Financing Summit in France and what Nigeria stands to benefit from the event, let's hear from the president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adeshino, who shared some highlights of his meeting with Tinubu in France.
I discussed with His Excellency the President about a couple of things. First, of course, is agriculture, to see what we can do to support the government with regard to the Mr. President's vision in agriculture. We discussed about special agro-industrial processing zones, for which we already have about $520 million for Nigeria, and how we are going to make sure that that project actually gets accelerated to give quick wins to the president. The other one that we talked about is the power sector. How we will bring support to support his efforts and his vision and that of his government with regard to how to improve the access. The president wants to make sure that there's access to electricity in Nigeria, and therefore he talked to us about how we can support him in that, and I gave him the assurance that we will, support significantly the power sector.
All right, Chiamaka, thanks for joining me on today's podcast. I think the second time, so I think I should give you
Drum rolls. Thank you, Titi, for having me. Thank you for keeping this up too.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. All right, so let's start with the president's spokesperson said that Tinubu traveled because he wants to use the opportunity to, attract foreign investment into Nigeria. And the fact that you were there, I'm sure you would have seen some obvious and not so obvious collaborations. So which ones are we expecting in the near future?
I think the best way to start this conversation was say, bonjour, bonjour. That's like what you hear on the street of Paris. It's such a beautiful city. Well, straight into the question, I think the very exact words of Dele Alake was say the president was here to network, and then of course he went on to say attracts foreign direct investment into the country. And for me, I think that's emotion already, because on the day of the summit, on the first day of the summit, that was on Thursday, after the opening ceremony, the president had to leave back to his hotel. The president, the meetings actually happened at Hotel Plaza Athénée in France, in Paris, France, of course. So this is just like putting specific details to it. This was where the meetings happened, on the 5th floor exactly. And then I arrived at the time where the meeting with the Afrexim Bank was closing, and I got to speak with the Afrexim Bank president, Mr. Benedict Orama, that should be his name. And so he talked about how he was there to brief the president on the activities of the Afrexim Bank, and how, of course, they've been a major contributor to Nigeria's oil imports and further partnerships, and how they're keen on helping the president or this administration, move further, move the country further. For me, that's a clear indication on, okay, this man has said this is what he wants to do, and apparently he's starting to walk the talk. Now, I don't know if all of these meetings will translate into investments, but the networking part is happening. Okay. So we have to wait in the near future to see what's happening. Seated there, of course, the European Development Bank for Construction. There was an EU bank, European Bank, Development Bank, which came in. They were led by a lady. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to speak to them. She said she wasn't going to speak to the press about the details of the meeting. But I guess she's well within her right to decide if she wants to speak to the media about her meetings or not. And it's also important that people are careful not to let out premature details out of the bag before they are ready to come out. So these two meetings I'm aware of. They happened on Thursday, and as soon as those meetings ended, I had to return to the summit. So for me, this is an indication that the president is walking the talk. He started his networking with various partners across the continent, I'd like to say, from Africa to Europe. And at the top of my head, if I'm to do some very non-expert permutation or projection, I would say that we hope that the very soon to expect investments will be coming from Europe, as we've seen. And this also feeds into the narrative. I say this also to say that over time Europe has said a lot of things about how Africa is its neighbor, and Nigeria is the largest country on the continent, so you expect that people will come here for various reasons. And we have a very big market. 200 million plus people, it's not a joke. It's a big market for anything you want to invest in. And it only takes, a little more than a blind person to see the obvious opportunities available in this country. So I would say that yes, the president is walking his talk. He started networking. I saw that firsthand in Paris. I saw it also in the way he had good jovial greetings, and we saw that those in the pictures to great optics. But I also learned that he was supposed to meet with Janet Yellen, who is the U.S. Secretary of Treasury. I don't know if that meeting happened, but I heard it was mentioned that he was meant to meet with the woman, even though at the time the meeting wasn't sealed. They hadn't picked a time because of how tight the schedule of the summit for, and Ms. Yellen was very much involved in the meeting, so she was virtually at all the panels happening at the meeting. So if that did not happen, it's quite explainable why it didn't happen. So yeah, hopefully we should expect that these networks will translate into foreign direct investments.
All right, so I understand that the US, France, and Switzerland and other partners, private investors, are seeking to have an interest in investing in Nigeria. Do you know in specifics what sectors they are actually looking to invest in?
It will be too early to tell. I don't know the details, and I don't think anyone aside the president's immediate group would know the details of these things. You know, it takes a couple of negotiations and proposals to arrive at, okay, what sector do we want to invest in? And the investors will also want to look at what sector is viable for them.
Okay.
There's interest on both sides. So Nigeria will want to seek investment on things that will benefit them, and so would the investors as well. So it's supposed to be a win-win situation. So everyone is going to take some time to deliberate, to go do the whole back and forth, the proposal, and when it comes in. So at the moment, I don't have the details, and I imagine no one else aside the president's immediate circle will have those details.
Okay, but the Afrexim Bank, Afrexim president said something about helping with the effects of removal of fuel subsidy. Can you speak more on that?
Yeah, so I guess that was in the general sense of it, of, you know, the immediate concerns of people. So we need to cushion the shock of the removal of fuel subsidy, which of course the president has asked Nigerians to be patient with. But the realities are very, very glaring. You know, people have been plunged into further suffering. You know, even things that have no business with fuel subsidy have also hiked the food price and everything. So it's only natural that if you're coming in and you want to appear to be enticing to a people or the government, you touch on issues that affect them. So of course the government will need to cushion the effects, the shocks of this fuel subsidy, and they have to find a way to do that. So if anyone is coming to the table to say, oh, we want to help you to cushion the shock of the fuel subsidy you've removed, which a lot of, you know, economic experts have applauded the president, but on the other hand, I feel that no one seems to be talking about how this has affected the lives of people, even though, and I'm not an economist, so I don't know, but people say that, economists say that in the long run, this will be beneficial to the Nigerian people. So before we get to the long run, in this short run and middle run, what is happening to the Nigerian people? So I guess it's on that backdrop that Afrexim is being extra smart to say this is what we want to do. And I would imagine it's part of their maybe corporate social responsibility or part of their mandate. I'm not, I don't know fully what their mandate. I know that they're export-import bank for Africa based in Cairo. I don't know if these other details are part of what they do, but I imagine if he says so, then definitely they should have some provision to do that.
World Bank president at the summit said the bank would create a toolkit, a catastrophe toolkit, in response to the calls for a reform of the current global financial architecture. For people who did not follow up on this, can you explain or give highlights on this particular toolkit? Yeah,
so I'm going to start from the last part of that sentence. In response to the call for reforms to the global financial architecture. So the summit in Paris was to say the current financial system, the current global financial architecture, what is obtainable with the financial system of the world, is not favorable to all. It's favorable to people in the global north, people in the global south, most people in the global south, with the exclusion of China, I think, you know, are not benefiting from this system as much as their counterparts in the global north. And it's only reasonable to ask for equity, right? And so the Paris summit was to push the agenda of the Bridgetown initiative, and this was, you know, initiated by Barbados. The Prime Minister of Barbados was Mia Motley, and she's been a very vocal voice if you followed her from perhaps since Barbados became a republic, since her inauguration as Prime Minister, and last year at COP27 she was the loudest in the room, perhaps one of the few female voices we had in Durham, and she's taking this further to say the Bretton Woods Initiative of 1944, which brought about the IMF and the World Bank, you know, this was an initiative that was created after the World Wars, to say, okay, to help development after the World War, right? And so it achieved to a very large extent its purpose. But even the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said it's redundant. That's what everybody's saying. It's redundant. And so when something is redundant, what do? You reform it, transform, you make it adapt to new realities. And that's what the Bridgetown Initiative is coming to do. That's the proposal. Okay, Bretton Woods is outdated, more or less. Can we now have an initiative that adapts to the realities of today, that speaks to debt suspension, that takes into cognizance that climate change is a reality, and countries are deeply affected by climate change, and different countries at different degrees. So you cannot expect that you treat a country, for example, say Niger, for example, which has droughts going on and famine happening in Niger. You don't expect to put it on the same pedestal as a country as Nigeria, even though Nigeria has its own share, fair share of the climate change effects. You don't want to put them on the same pedestal and say, okay, your debt, your interest on the debt is going to be this. So there's a proposal for debt suspension. Say within the period that countries are going through this natural disasters that they have no control whatsoever over, you suspend the debt they owe and let them deal with the existential threats that climate change poses, right? And so afterwards we could discuss. And then there's also the conversation about the interest on debts. Why countries in the global south, I beg your pardon, why our interest on debts huge compared to the others, the risking debts. A lot of conversations around the Bridgetown Initiative, which is what pushed the World Bank, I imagine, because Ajay Banga was there at the Paris summit, and since assuming office, I think 3 weeks ago, this is his first, huge summit, and I think he has a lot on his plate, and this proposal is a big one, ambitious yet achievable, if you ask me. So he's proposing that, of course, debt suspension, catastrophic toolkits. Now, simply what it means, catastrophe, remove catastrophe, replace it with natural disaster.
Okay.
So when countries are dealing with this, you create a toolkit that puts into cognizance, puts in mind that this is happening. Countries are prone to natural disasters, so when we're handling them, we handle them in light of this is what's going on. Okay. So that no country has to choose between development and climate change, right? So these things work hand in hand. So if a country is going through this, allow them breathe. So this is feeding, when Nigeria say, let the poor breathe, it's typically what the Bridgetown Initiative is saying. Let the poor breathe. Let the poor get on board. Let us come to where you are, So development should not leave anyone behind, and I think that's what the Bridgetown Initiative is trying to do. And it's also in line with the Bridgetown Initiative that the World Bank, led by Ajay Banga, is saying, we're creating this to help the global south. And I had great initiative, but I had a conversation with a business climate change consultant around this issue, someone who's very familiar with the terrain, and I said, what does this mean for the global south? What does this mean for Nigeria, right? And then his response was, we need to understand what criteria the World Bank will be putting in place for countries to be able to access the funds made available by these two, because they'll be making available funds to reduce shock and all of these things. So what are the criteria? I beg your pardon, criteria, because criteria is plural already. So what are the criteria, right? Does Nigeria qualify? How do you measure who qualifies? So we may be going through different natural disasters, but we probably will not qualify, right? So countries have to keep this in mind and know that, okay, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, because we're not all going through the same challenges. We encounter this at different degrees, right, as different countries, and then we don't expect to be treated the same. It's not going to be what's the word now? Maybe a basket approach. I don't know if that's the right expression, but it's not like going to be like mangoes in a basket, so everybody gets the same treatment or not. So that's basically what the World Bank is proposing.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to France's proposal, a new global financial system. Does it have similarities with that of the proposal from the World Bank, or are there differences? If there are, Explain.
So there are no differences really. All of these have come under the umbrella of the Bridgetown Initiative. So the financial summit at Paris last week was as a result of the communications or the partnership, the collaboration between Barbados and France. And I really like to commend the president of France, Emmanuel Macron. Everybody was in the room. And so when I say everybody, I don't mean the 8 billion people in the world, but there was proper representation. There were 39 heads of state invited. Out of those 39, 25 were African leaders.
Wow.
So it sends a significant message that we want you to be part of this conversation. And one thing I loved so much about this meeting was the frank conversation. African leaders were frank about what Africa wanted, what Africa needs, what we are, and what our place should be in all of this. And I've seen a lot of videos online, you know, praising President William Ruto of Kenya as, you know, these are frank conversations.
What conversations were had? What demands were made?
Yeah, so I'll start with Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. So he started by saying that Africa should not be looked at as a continent who has come to beg.
Okay.
We're not in need of generosity, right? We, in terms of, you know, global carbon emission, we contribute less than 5% of, you know, carbon emission globally. And then we don't expect to be treated as peasants or beggars at this table. And I love that he opened with that very clearly. And then he went on to say that we've had a lot of conversations, said a lot of nice things, but one way to show action, or to show commitment rather, or to show that this holds water would be commitment. And he started by saying, prove to us by completing the Inga Dam in DRC. The Inga Dam in DRC is able to power, well, according to Ramaphosa, 12 to 15 countries within the region. Now, the Inga Dam, if completed, would produce the highest amount of megawatts. I'm sorry, the register is not correct, but to provide the most electricity, more than the Chinese dam that currently produces the highest electricity or megawatts, and so like hydroelectric dam. It will be like the biggest hydroelectric power station in the world. Okay. Now we have such sitting in Africa, and it's not powered. Now remember that Africa has a very big power generation issue. Yeah. A lot of people in Africa live without power, live without electricity. I'm going far. I'm saying Africa. In Nigeria, Titi, I'm sure you don't have light in your house. There was no light in my house coming out. So if we have such a big, this is more than a gold mine. I don't know what the right word to use. So the most sought after treasure or mineral in the world. That's what we have in the Inga Dam. And it's seated in DRC Congo. So I like the fact that President Nguesso of DRC and Ramaphosa of Cyril were very clear. They didn't beat about the bush. Do this as a sign that we are going to, you know, we're moving forward. It's not another talk shop. And then President Ruto of Kenya went on to talk about how Africa wants to be equal partners at the table. We're not asking you to pay for us, we'll pay to, you know. So that demand to be treated as equals, for me, was very, very important. So it's about time, you know, countries in the global south are no longer seen as beggars or, you know, people wanting handouts. So if you're asking us to do this, you should be ready to give something. So if you're asking us, for instance, to stop funding fossil fuel projects in Africa, whereas you've developed on the back of fossil fuel all your lives, then something must give. You have to help us with the just energy transition, right? You have to help us with renewables. You have to help us with the technologies. And over time, the Global North has made promises about how they would help us with the technological know-how. I remember very vividly the interview I had with Matthew Baldwin, who is the EU Vice president, I think, on energy, and he spoke about how the EU would help transfer technological know-how to Nigeria, for instance. So fossil fuel is obviously causing an existential threat. Now, if you want countries of the world who are far behind you in terms of development to stop this, there should be an alternative. So you don't take my spoon from me, for instance, saying, oh, it's not good for you, and you don't give me an alternative. So if you're taking a metal spoon from me because it might hurt me or something, you should be able to give me a plastic spoon or a wooden spoon, something that won't hurt me, right? So you can't take that and not give me anything in return. So basically, you know, the Global Financial Summit is saying it wants a just, equitable, basically everyone on board and getting equal treatment. No one should be left behind. And in the words of President Macron, I'm paraphrasing now, he says, oh, a world where no country has to choose between development and natural disaster caused by change in climate. And for me again, it feeds into the statement from Egypt as COP27 president: climate change and development are not exclusive of each other. They go hand in hand, so treat them in the same way. Don't keep anyone aside. So if you're saying pause development and let's handle climate change, how do you do that? So basically, for me, the Paris Summit just reinforces, for me, it just carries over the conversation from COP27, brings it in. In September, from 4 to 6, there will be an Africa Climate Summit in Kenya. So the hope is that this will also be carried over to Kenya and continue, then move to the G20 Summit, move to UNGA, and then to COP28 at the end of the year. Hopefully, we'll see something substantial coming out of it beyond all the beautiful talks.
Okay, so on a final note, I mean, it was good news when we saw reports that emerged saying that developed countries are finally going to pay up or fulfill the pledge of $100 billion in terms of climate financing.
Yep.
And it's said that the countries in the global south are the ones that might be the beneficiaries of these funds. What are the criteria or mechanism put in place to ensure that African countries receive the fair share of the pledge funds?
I don't know about the criteria, and you have to forgive me, but what is clear is that this climate financing was a promise made at COP15 in the Paris COP as a promise to developing countries. Okay. So it's not in contention who is getting it. It's for the global south. Okay. It's for developing countries. If there will be criteria, or if there are, I don't know about them yet, but hopefully by the end of the year, we'll hear more about this. But I'm clear, sources at the French presidency have said this money has been achieved. So let's do very quick maths. The OEDC on their website said that in 2020, as of 2020, we had realized 83.3 billion. That's a few steps away from 100 billion. So by the end of this year, they will show us what we have, what the current amount is. And trust me, well, I won't say trust me. The sources at the French presidency said that we might as well have exceeded the 100 billion. Going by that, small mathematics. But this will not be announced officially until 2025, which was the agreement made at COP26 that, okay, we're moving this here, and by 2025, we hope to achieve this. Interesting things are going on within the financial landscape, Titi. And it was also interesting for me to learn about the special drawing rights, where we've also reached a certain, I think, $100 billion as well, and $60 billion of that have been earmarked for development. And what part of the world need development? It's the global south, so it's coming this way. What we don't know is criteria or how this will be earmarked, but hopefully in the coming days, the IMF would give us more details, because that money is in the IMF, so they'll give us more details about how this money will be used. But for me, I see light, and I'm kind of hopeful. For the first time, I didn't feel like it was a talk shop. Okay. I felt like people were really honest, saying what was on their mind. When the president of Ethiopia spoke, president of Chad, president of Niger, Ruto spoke, Ramaphosa, when the president of Brazil spoke, you could tell that it was high time we brought honesty to this table and started to work. And so when Lula said, I'm a 77-year-old president, but I'm here to do the work, paraphrasing, I mean, it may be seen as a political statement, but this was a man that was able to clearly outline the challenges faced by his country and the changes over time. You know, he was president before, then went away, then came back last year. It goes to say that we all know that sooner or later, sooner than later actually, the effects of our nonchalance around the world will hit us. So the glaciers are melting off in the global north. There's drought in the global south. People are migrating from the global south to the global north for various reasons, including climate change. In no distant time, the burden of all of this
We'll go back to them.
will hit on everybody. Global south, global north. So it's about time we all come back to the drawing board and get working. And I would imagine it's the rude reality that has hit everyone now, and it's time for a frank conversation. So for me, the Paris Summit was timely, it was important to have, and we're hoping that, you know, all of the conclusion and the commitment they've made so far will be followed through. It's only important that they follow it through.
All right, so away from the plenty talks on climate and finances and all that, it appears you're really, really glowing, and France has done a number on you.
Yes,
So
please.
what are like your most memorable moments and not so memorable moments?
I had a lot of good memories with France. I think being a journalist comes with a lot of great things with it. So of course people say if you go to France and you don't see the Eiffel Tower, then you have to go back. Well, I don't have to go back. I went to the Eiffel Tower. I saw the Notre Dame, which got burnt in 2019. And at that point, I really don't know. Maybe the good Catholic lady in me just showed up. I felt some emotions. I'm like, oh my God. I was sad for a bit, and I had to like say, what's going on with you? Please, can you move on? But it was good to see these things for yourself. And then, for the lovers, I saw that, you know, the bridge where you go with a padlock to seal your love and unlock your love.
Were you able to lock anybody?
They are all locked in my heart. So I don't have to lock anyone. I think the not so great experience I had, but it's the job description really, was the day I had to, was on the conference day actually, the summit day, the first day of the summit. The Palais Bologna was cordoned off. So it looked like everybody was avoiding it. So usually I'll take the metro. So I learned how to use the metro in Paris, and I was using like an expert. I can take you on a tour and go and use the metro right now. You know, so I was in a hurry to meet up with the meeting that the president was having. So I came out. I was almost an hour late, so I wanted to just take a taxi. There's no need to take a metro. But apparently, the metros are faster than the taxi because you're underground, no traffic, no drama. And so I was waiting to take a metro. I was even willing to pay 17 euros to get to somewhere that was just 10 minutes away from me. You know, that's a lot of money just to the conversion and you find out. You know, but I couldn't even get a taxi. I'm like, what's going on? So I was antsy, I was panicking, and you know the language barrier too. My French it's not great, but it's a work in progress. You know, so I had a translator there, and he had to go back to the others. We're a group of journalists from Africa and South America, so you couldn't just take the translator away from every other person because you wanted to catch a cab. Eventually, I got to the metro station. I missed my way. I was in the wrong line, so I had to come back. I'm like, oh my God, why am I going through all of this pain just for what? And then at the end of the day, I was so tired. I had to buy 2 plates of kebab to compensate myself for a good job done. But it was generally great.
All right, this is where we wrap up today's episode. Thanks for sharing your experience and all of the events. I think almost over a week event within 30 minutes or less than that. And we can't wait for your next trip so that you can come share.
Thank you. I can't wait for the next trip so I can share with you guys. This is interesting. I'll come again.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you today.
This is where we wrap up today's episode. I hope you had a great time with us. Make sure you give it a date with us on Premium Times Half Hour podcast every Thursday. Again, this show is brought to you by Premium Times, the leading multimedia news platform, which serves you every minute stories that can help you make informed decisions and hold public officials, individuals, and organizations accountable. We have cartoons, videos, podcasts, and other interesting content for your delight. And for timely updates on politics, entertainment, sports, and business, visit our website www.premiumtimesng.com and follow us on all our social media platforms. I'll be here again, same time, same day next week. From my lovely self, Chiamaka Okafor, do have a great weekend.
News beyond the surface. Investigations that uncover deep secrets. Analysis with thought-provoking perspectives. Reports that focus on human interest. Premium Times, a leading digital news platform, brings you these and more every hour through videos, written and podcast reports. Visit our website on www.premiumtimesng.com and follow us on all social media platforms for timely updates on politics, entertainment, sport and business. Don't miss out.